invite and to welcome our three speakers for today. Our first speaker is Ms. Samantha Allison, the director of the Ahmed Ibn Majid Project for Marine Mapping and Sustainable Development. Samantha earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Marine Chemistry from Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida, and has worked on environmental and educational projects in countries such as the US, Nicaragua, Thailand, Madagascar, and the UAE. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here.
Our second speaker for today is Dr. John Burt, the Associate Professor of Biology and Head of Environmental Studies at New York University of Abu Dhabi. He obtained his PhD from the University of Windsor, Canada, and was awarded the 2017 Sheikh Mubarak Al Nahyan Award for the Natural History of the UAE for his continuing contributions to enhancing public awareness of the marine systems of the UAE. Welcome, Dr. Burt.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is all ours. And lastly, but not least, we have our third speaker for today, Mr. Abdullah Suwaidi, the founder of Suwaidi Pearls. He is the last of a long line of original pearl divers going back 4 generations based here in Ras Al Khaimah. He obtained his master's degree in international relations from the Australian National University in Canberra. Welcome, Mr. Abdullah.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to dive right in. We have our first question for Samantha. So, of course, over the past 3 years, you've been working as the director of the Ahmed Ibn Majid Project for Marine Mapping and Sustainable Development. Samantha, could you tell us a little bit more about the work you do to map marine life in Ras Al Khaimah in particular?
Yeah, so my project is something that I love very much because I love Ras Al Khaimah very much. And the goal of our project is to find a comprehensive view of the value of the marine resources here, their needs, and how we can use them sustainably to both balance the community needs as well as the environmental needs here in Ras Al Khaimah. So I have the pleasure of working with Dr. John Burt and Abdullah and many of our other local stakeholders to analyze what we have here in Ras Al Khaimah, our coral reefs, our seagrass meadows, our endangered and critically endangered sea turtles, everything that we have out there, and working with tourism, working with the environmental agencies to figure out, well, this is what we have. These are our goals as an emirate and as a community. These are what we want our children to see when they grow up in Ras Al Khaimah. And how do we reach those goals and make sure that what we have is protected and enhanced?
Thank you so much, Samantha. You mentioned some of the needs that we have here in Ras Al Khaimah regarding, making sure that our marine life is protected and that we are continuing our efforts to preserve it. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of those particular needs to RAC?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know that Ras Al Khaimah has the most diverse coral reefs in the UAE. And we know that because of research done by Dr. John Burt and other teams at NYU Abu Dhabi, and research that has been around here in Ras Al Khaimah for over a decade. So we have documents that were supporting the creation of marine protected areas here in Ras Al Khaimah that date back to at least 2008. So we do have a fair foundation of knowledge here that needs to be developed. And so what we do as part of our project is continue to monitor those areas so that we can provide evidence to our environmental agency, the EPDA, to other stakeholders here to continue to support and facilitate gathering knowledge about what needs to be done. So this was perhaps a coral area that existed then. Does it still exist now? What is the state? What has changed? Is there too many sea urchins? Sea urchin is an issue that we have here in Ras Al Khaimah. So working with, honestly, everyone from our fishermen to our local stakeholders to say, well, we want tourism here, we want coral, we want all of this stuff. Well, the turbidity is not good. There's too many sea urchin. Well, what causes that? Is it overfishing? Is it pollution? Is it that we have too many motors in this shallow area? What do we do to prevent that? Because at the end of the day, no one person is going to solve this alone. This is a community, and we need to protect the environment as a community.
Absolutely, I can't agree with you more. And we were talking actually about this a little bit in our first Nature Series panel as well. It was focusing more so on wildlife, but of course, as we know, so much of the rich animal and plant species that we have do live under the sea and contribute quite heavily to, you know, to our lives in general. So thank you so much for that. I have our first question for Dr. Bird. As a leading marine biologist, you are particularly well known in your field for your research on deepening our understanding of marine biology in the Arab region. Could you provide us with some context on why the Arabian Gulf is so interesting from a research perspective, and perhaps elaborate a little bit on the main marine ecosystems that occur regionally?
Thanks for the question, and thank you to the audience for attending today. It's a real pleasure to be back in Ras Al Khaimah. I made the drive down from Abu Dhabi today, which seems like a mission when you're driving in the Emirates, but I love coming down here. I don't know how much of this is common knowledge because I've been working on the marine systems of the Gulf for like 15 years. But the shores of the Gulf are actually the shores of the world's hottest sea every single summer. Because the Gulf is so shallow, the average depth is only 30 meters, it heats up a lot in the summertime and it doesn't have a capacity to cool itself. And so we do get temperatures in the water in the summer. As anyone who's gone swimming or pearling knows, you're going to experience temperatures of around 36 degrees Celsius. So this is an extreme thermal stress for any marine organisms. And so you see influences of this. So as you leave the Indian Ocean, go through the Sea of Oman and enter the Gulf, you start seeing species disappear. And so we have lower diversity in the Gulf than you have in most oceanic systems. But the species that we have here are amongst the most thermally tolerant in the world. So if you're interested in questions around climate change, for example, this is a really interesting place to work. I myself, as you mentioned, work on coral reefs, but we have many other amazing ecosystems here in the Emirates and in the Gulf. For example, we have 4% of the world's seagrass beds, the area of the entire world's seagrass beds, just in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. And that's supporting species of green turtles, which are critically endangered. We also have, of course, dugongs on those seagrass beds. Of course, we have mangroves that you have here in Ras Al Khaimah as well, being a very important blue carbon sink, pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soils. So again, combating climate change, and a variety of other ecosystems along our shores, all of which are biologically important, but have economic and social value as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burt. I actually did not know that, and I think much of our audience would also agree with me that there's so much to learn from what our marine wildlife can do. What are some of the particular species that are very resistant to the heat underwater?
So virtually all the species that you have here, the only reason that they're here is because they're thermally tolerant. So if you take, for example, you know, there's one species of seagrass that's here that dominates. Unionurus is the species name of it, Halophila. This species basically is extensive across the southern basin of the Gulf because it has no competition from weaker species. So there are two other species that are here, but they tend to be relatively uncommon until you get up here towards Ras Al Khaimah where the conditions aren't as extreme.
All right, thank you so much for that. And yeah, for also just trying to raise awareness about what these species can do for us here in Ras Al Khaimah and why they're so valuable as well to the ecosystem. Mr. Abdullah, I have my first question for you. So of course you are the founder of an exceptional Arab pearl farm that I think is the only Arab pearl farm that we have, or one of very few. In your opinion, what do you think are some of the key benefits of pearl diving to Ras Al Khaimah and of course to the wider UAE's economy?
Thank you very much. It's very hard to tell you the key benefits of the pearling in 5 minutes. But I can share with you two major and important key factors. One of it is the historical perspective of the pearling and its effect for the whole region, Ras Al Khaimah in specific, and the coast of the UAE in general. And the other one is nowadays economy and how we can see the pearling affect the today economy. The key perspective, Ras Al Khaimah has been known for one thing, and the coast of the UAE known for over centuries for one thing, one single economy, pearl diving. And this is completely has changed in last century, mid of last century, and we become more oil diversify economic, and we completely forgot everything about the pearls. We can go back at the 13th centuries where the booming talk about Julfar, the old name of Ras Al Khaimah. And always when historians and explorer and traveler pass by here, they speak about two things. One of it is pearls, and pearls, the best pearls that comes from Bahrain and from Julfar. So this is kind of an excellence certifications of a quality for a product that was dominant in the past, and that also in the whole UAE. The now and today economy, we are not 10 years ago, we are not 20 years ago, we are today where every business now talking about sustainability, about CSR. Our business is mainly about sustainability, and it's very diverse. It is tourism, so we get a lot of people coming, not looking for a high-rising building or largest mall or shopping malls. They're after eco-tourism product that they want to learn and teach their children. That's why we see floods of people coming from all over the world in groups, in family trips, in a friends trip, and so on. Ras Al Khaimah become the producer of the finest pearl now in comparison with other pearls produced around the world. It is colorful, 13, 14 different colors, where other places is one or two colors. And the quality of nacre depositions that we get from this mollusk that Professor was talking about, that's keeping up with the heat of summertime. That's a good news for us here in Ras Al Khaimah.
Thank you so much. Apologies, there's a bit of a lag sometimes with pressing the mic button and it turning on, but that's truly great to hear, and I love that you touched upon the educational value of the pearling industry, and also just letting people know and raising awareness of Ras Al Khaimah's very rich history and heritage. I mean, we sit here today in Al Jazeera Al Hamra Heritage Village, which is the only surviving pearling village in the entire Gulf region that is still preserved. So I do think that it's very important to raise awareness about the value of the pearls in the past for the economy, but also today in terms of the culture and the heritage of the emirate itself. So thank you very much for that. Sam, I come back to you with another question. So in your opinion, why do you think it's so important for marine resource development to be sustainable? And could you tell us what that looks like exactly?
Thank you for that question. It's something I think about a lot. And I think that we all know the shallow answer to that, which is that, you know, there's no way otherwise, right? If there's not sustainability or we don't act sustainably, there's going to be nothing left for us to act any way to. But as scientists, as philosophers, as thought leaders, as anyone who looks to make an impact in a community, we have a job to look deeper. And I think that when I at least think about sustainability, there's something else that means a lot more to me that comes to mind. And that is that we're fed this sort of story that it's humanity that ties us all together, right? That it is our humanity that connects us. And we want to believe this because it's comforting and because we want that to be true. But a lesson that every young environmentalist learns is that we don't protect things for their sake. We protect things for our sake. We don't help our neighbors just to help them. We help them because we understand that if we don't help them, those repercussions might come back to damage us. And so it's not our humanity that connects us. When you look in this world and you see all the things that are wrong, it's not humanity that connects us, it's fragility. And that is something that we cannot escape from. We are fragile and we are connected and we are interdependent whether we like it or not. And we need to have the courage to face that fact. And then once we have that courage, we can start to see, well, these are the things that we need to do to protect our future, to protect our children, to protect our neighbors. And doing that isn't just about protecting ourselves. right? I think that when you really look at sustainability and where we want to be as a people, you see that sustainability isn't just a means to an end. Yes, it is a Hail Mary that we're throwing to try and save ourselves before we disappear off the face of this earth. But when you really look at it, sustainability is an opportunity for us to regain our humanity. Sustainability is the opportunity for us to take ourselves as communities and as people where we want to be, to find that love and that nature that connects us, and to actually find that humanity and make that the center point of our connection. Sustainability is that opportunity. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think it might be tough to understand, or you may not agree with it completely, but I think if you try to understand that perspective, you can go really far in understanding how much we can benefit, how much we depend on each other, and how much sustainability and humanity and all of these things that we care about very deeply, all of these words that we sort of toss around without thinking what they mean, we start to understand just how deep that connection goes, and understand that it's not just for us, it is for our neighbors, and there's no difference between anyone, right? We're in this together, and we have to start thinking like that.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I couldn't agree more. And just to ask a follow-up question, because you talked a little bit about fragility and how one of the reasons why people actually start to mobilize and work towards change is when they start worrying about themselves. With regards to marine resources, do you think that there's a way in which people could be encouraged to care more about marine life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really doesn't come down to just thinking about marine life. It comes down to thinking about yourself as a person. I think number one, the first thing that you do is you recognize how important you are. You recognize how valuable you are. You recognize the impact that you have on the community around you, because you don't change the world by changing the world. You change the world by changing the community that you are in now. Not waiting 10 years, not looking at your past, wherever you are now. You look at yourself and you think about how important you are, what you can do, and you do the very best that you can, and you raise the people around you up. And then the next thing you do with that power that you have is you hold big companies and corporations and leadership accountable, because they make the decisions that impact all of us. So number one, find your power, find yourself, find your motive, right? And work with your community to do it as correct. And number two, use that power that you have inside of you to hold people accountable.
Absolutely agree. Could not agree more. Thank you so much. Dr. Burt, I have another question for you. So you do have a very wide portfolio of research on marine systems in the Gulf region, but of course you are most well known for your research on coral reefs in the UAE, and you talked a little bit about that at the start of the session. So could you maybe provide us with some more details on the importance of coral reefs, what the status of our reefs are today, and what conservation and management interventions are being explored in the Emirates?
Thank you. So coral reefs are by far the most biodiverse ecosystem that we have here in the Emirates, and globally that are significantly important as well. You know, when you think about coral reefs, they occupy less than a single % of the world's ocean area, but they contain 25% of all species on Earth. So that's an amazing biological asset, right? And when you think of the products and services we derive from coral reefs, you've got things like coastal protection, fisheries. So here in the UAE, out of the top 10 fishes that we have commercially, 9 of them associate with reefs through their life cycle. So really an important habitat to try and conserve and protect. I'm particularly interested in them because of the value that they can provide to science in terms of that climate change story that I was talking about a few moments ago. If we've got reefs that can survive at 36 degrees Celsius here in the UAE, what does that mean for the rest of the world? Because if you take, for example, the Great Barrier Reef or the Caribbean, and you expose corals there to 32 degrees Celsius, all the corals would be dead. 33 degrees Celsius, all the fish would be dead. Yet we have corals that are surviving here in the Gulf at temperatures well beyond what they're expecting by 2100 in other parts of the world. So it's a question of, number one, how has that happened, which we now know from the genomics work that we've done has become because of genetic adaptation, which is actually remarkable because there was no Gulf about 18,000 years ago during the last ice age. So this is a remarkably short amount of time for adaptation to have occurred. We also know from crossbreeding programs that we've done in our lab at NYU Abu Dhabi and over in Australia that you can take the thermal tolerance of corals here. So if you collect the sperm of corals from here and breed them with eggs of corals from the Great Barrier Reef or the Indian Ocean, which we've done, they have enhanced thermal tolerance in the offspring as well. And they can survive Gulf-like temperatures even if they're from Australia or elsewhere in the Indian Ocean. In terms of what's going on in the UAE, unfortunately, there's been a lot of, we were just talking about sustainability. So many of you know Jazrat Al Hamra here for the buildings that are made of coral, right? The corals that were used in these buildings were harvested over something like 6 centuries. So we did carbon dating of or uranium thorium dating of the corals that are in these buildings here. The oldest one that we found is from 1552, so a very long time ago. And the youngest one that we found was from just in the early 1920s. So for hundreds of years, people were mining corals from the sea here, but in a way that was sustainable so that they could sustain these buildings, because there was almost 500 buildings in this little village, almost entirely made of coral. And we did a calculation. There was over 11 million corals in this village alone. Now, that was being done over centuries, but what's happened, unfortunately, in the last several decades, mainly because of coastal development, but also because of climate change, is we've been losing reefs across the Emirates. And so we have this really important biological asset from a global perspective that we're actually losing on a regional scale because of development-related pressures. So this is something I'm working with the government here, both at the federal level and the state levels, to try and to mitigate some of these risks, to ensure that we maintain these valuable and important ecosystems going into the future.
And what would you say are some of the risks that you were talking about earlier?
The risks for coral reefs?
Yeah.
Again, it's mainly because of, so on a localized scale, it'll be from coastal development. And this is often because of either under-regulated business processes or relatively weak EIA frameworks from an international perspective. But it's also sometimes the case of subcontractors to the developers not employing things like silt curtains, which protect from sedimentation around dredging. So there's a variety of different layers of risks that are involved in that. But the biggest risk to coral reefs, as well as most marine systems here in the Emirates, is actually coming from climate change now. And we're looking at, in the next several decades, we're going to see remarkable changes in the ecosystems that we have off of our shores. I'm already witnessing it myself, and I've only been here 15 years.
And sorry, just another quick question. I'm a little curious because you did say that our reefs here are more resistant in general to the increase in temperature. But would it be possible that with, of course, the increasing temperature due to climate change, that our reefs, which are already quite resistant to heat, could they be further damaged by climate change?
Well, I've just authored a paper it's not out yet, but it's titled "The Paradoxical Vulnerability of the World's Most Thermally Tolerant Coral Reefs." Because yes, they are robust and able to tolerate these really extreme temperatures, but they're sitting at a threshold, right? So this is the highest known on Earth. And we've had, in 2021, the temperatures went up to 38 degrees Celsius. That's 2 degrees Celsius higher than 36, which is already extreme. And the Gulf is actually warming at twice the global average just because of the weird geography we have here, it being a small isolated body of water, really shallow. So, this asset that we have, what I'm really trying to promote down in Abu Dhabi is getting some funding to do these crossbreeding experiments to help export this asset while we still can.
I guess if the coral reefs that we have here, which are of the most robust around the world, are becoming endangered, then we actually do need to start worrying more so about the health of our coral reefs. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit more about that. Mr. Abdullah, I have a question for you. So, of course, your family has been undertaking pearl diving for generations in the small fishing village of Al-Rams. What do you think is the key to maintaining sustainable pearl diving in the pearling industry? I think you touched a little bit upon this in your first answer, but if you could tell us a little bit more about what your family does to sustain pearl diving in Al-Rams.
We are very gifted in Al-Rams, in Ras Al Khaimah specifically. The climate and the terrains and the environment is completely different than anywhere else in the whole UAE. I've done my own studies in collecting samples from all over the UAE of oysters. the most strongest oysters that we have in the Gulf. I've done also in Qatar, Bahrain. I've taken some samples from Kuwait. The ones in Ras Al Khaimah is the strongest so far when it comes to resistance of climate changes and rising of temperature and other things. We don't do anything for sustainability. Pearl oyster is sustainable themselves. I don't know if, I'm gonna turn this into I'm gonna ask the audience question to waken them up. Pearl oyster are created to filter the water. Do you know how many gallons of water they filter daily? Anybody knows? Nobody? No cheats? Anybody been to the farms before? Bintada radiata, the pearl oysters, lives in Ras Al Khaimah and the whole Gulfs. Filter approximately 50 to 60 gallons a day of seawater. In our farm, we grow approximately 40,000 oysters, and we can go up to 100,000. So 40,000 oysters, filtering approximately 2 million gallons of water a day, multiply by 30 days, approximately 72 million gallons a day. And if you multiply it for 365 days, we're talking about approximately 1 billion gallons of water filtered daily, or annually, sorry. That's the farm itself. This is not only in Ras Al Khaimah. There are approximately 4,000 farms, pearl oyster farms around the world. The only one in the Gulf, the only one in the Middle East here in Ras Al Khaimah, and doing this job without us doing anything. All what I do is I breed them and we grow them and we seed them to make pearls. So during this filtration of the seawater, magic happens and pearls grows inside this oyster. So you can see how we are gifted. We, as a child and growing up, we hear stories about the treasures of the seas, but we never see it. I start to see it day after day, and I'm getting more worried about the future because the issue is not the climate change. We have a big issue here in Ras Al Khaimah, is the human practices, dumping from different activities, fishermen, people who settle near the shores. I wish if Dr. Saif here today speaks about his department efforts to do their best with other government departments, coordinations, to stop this habit. I think if our sea is going to die, not going to be dying from the climate change, but dumping tons of trash every day in Ras Al Khaimah. I'm here to just send a last message, and as Sam was saying that sustainability is an opportunity. We have the last opportunity today with the call of His Highness, the President of the UAE, for this year to become a sustainable. And for His Highness attending last week the summit, the government summits, and speaking to 20 head of states and a lot of governmental and people environment and looking at sustainability, we should stand with His Highness to support this vision of Ras Al Khaimah to become more sustainable with this gifted nature in the bottom of the sea. Oyster cannot do anything. If one day we stop producing pearl, is that because water is polluted with a lot of plastics dumped every day. Myself and Sam and other agencies worked very hard in the last 10 years to do our own cleaning. It cost us approximately 50,000 dirham a year to do our own cleaning of other people who's irresponsible. We don't see this in other Emirates. We just see it in Ras Al Khaimah. We wish to have a proper collaboration between the private sectors and government sectors to clean and to keep our sea sustainable for the next generation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdullah. I actually have two quick questions for you because I was a little curious about the oysters. You mentioned that the oysters filter the water. Does that have any kind of environmental benefits for the water and for the marine ecosystem?
I'll make it as simple as the trees that you see around us here. What do they observe from the air? What do they take? Carbon dioxide. And they release oxygens. Oysters do the same thing in the bottom of the sea. There is no carbon dioxide in the water, but there is nitrogen, and there is sediments in the seas. actually, in their process of breathing and eating, they take nitrogens and digest it and release oxygen on the other side. So they give, with this purification, when I talk about purifications, I'm talking about taking bad things like the trees and giving good things. So this is what's happening in the bottom of the sea. So oysters have a great value. They were created, all type of mollusks created for this. I'm talking about the pearl oyster, the Pinctada radiata, that grows widely here, and there are a lot of them in the bottom of the sea. So yes, they are with the great benefits for the bottom of the sea, and the more we grow them, the more we breed them, the more changes we can see in the salinity level, in the dissolved oxygen in the sea, and that is all good indications of a good environment in the bottom of the sea. So wherever pearl farms is, you will see a lot of turtle coming and stealing some of the oysters from the nets. You will see a lot of fish around growing, but unfortunately, next to that site, nets are thrown in the bays where it's supposed to be an incubator, and food security depends on these bays. Irresponsible fishermen comes and do that and kill an aged turtle, kill a lot of crabs, and keep them dead in the bottom. We have this all in evidence. We've seen them. We see this every day. So oyster is doing its job, but it has limits. And this limits is when we take an actions and protect our own environment.
Of course. And you also talked a little bit about how there's just a very high rate of dumping of trash into the bodies of water surrounding Ras Al Khaimah. Is this dumping taking place from, like, are people doing this, or is it more so corporations, or like who is responsible for throwing litter or dumping trash into the bodies of water around Ras Al Khaimah?
I don't think any of us here responsible of dumping. I know
should
this
hope
amazing,
not.
beautiful people around here, and children growing and caring for the environment more and more. Unfortunately, these activities is happening, commercial activities. One of them is camel farms that spreading more and more nearby the shore, licensed by the municipality, but they are not monitored very well. So because they don't have a proper dumping process, and we tried to explain to them, we tried to put the trashes, cans and whatever we could at a personal level. What they do, they collect this garbage, their usage of blacksmiths, aluminum foils, everything that can you imagine, and bottles, and they, in a purpose, they put them on the shore. They know that with the high tide, the water will come and drainage it away. So they believe, these people, they believe nature will do its work into cleaning this trashes. What's happened to these trashes? Float in the water for approximately 1.5 days, and then start to fall down in these creatures. Natural oysters, corals in a big number, are filled with a lot of plastics, and they die within approximately less than a month. So these irresponsible people with the commercial activities, they're making a lot of money. Camel farms makes a lot of money, but at the same time is trashing the bottom of the sea. Fishermen also is responsible. I don't think they are educated properly. They are not given the right licensing that include environmental responsibility, teaching them how this trash will affect the bottom of the sea. I don't hold them responsible only. I hold anybody giving them the license to do their commercial work, not to be giving them the proper training to be environmentally friendly, because probably most of them came from an environment where the trash is thrown in front of the house. Sewage passes over their house. This is not the UAE. UAE greater than that. UAE more cleaner than that. So we need to educate people with the commercial activities around the base not to do that. And if we don't do anything, tons and tons and tons of plastics and rubbish is going to the bottom of the sea and killing the creatures that we need. They're growing actually. The base, Ras Al Khaimah has an amazing base that supply the whole Gulf with the food security. Baby fish, mothers of the fish comes and lay down their eggs and babies grows there in the bay and they go out. We have an amazing island of mangroves is highly affected today. If you go to the roots, you'll find a plastic, foil, glasses, and everything that you can imagine. So I think we've done our best at the personal level, at the commercial level, but I think at the governmental level, Ras Al Khaimah government has to do something about this and stop this forever.
Yeah, of course. I think it's very unfortunate that so much trash is being dumped into the ocean and into the Arabian Gulf and the bodies of water surrounding, and arguably a lot of collaboration is needed within the Ras Al Khaimah government, but also with private sector entities and anyone else that's contributing to the issue, because of course without collaboration we cannot raise awareness about the reasons why so much of our marine life is threatened. So thank you for talking about that. And yeah, within the Ras Al Khaimah government, we do need to talk about this more and see how we can work together to solve the problem. So we have come to sort of the conclusion of the questions that I have. There's one last one I have for each of you. If you could tell us a little bit about why it's so important for us to protect marine life, especially here in Ras Al Khaimah and the wider UAE, because of course, as you all know, we have nature as the theme of our Fine Arts Festival, and that's something that we wanted to come back to. So yeah, why do you think it's so important to protect marine life? Sam, would you mind starting?
I think the obvious one is that we need to protect marine life because it protects us in return, right? We get our food, we get our energy, we get our air right from everything that in the ocean. There's a ton of value in that, but as it's an arts festival and as I like arts a lot, I think we also need to protect it because nature is our inspiration, right? Nature is our purpose for living. Nature is that connection. Nature, I come from the Caribbean, I come from a very diverse background, and when you hear the stories that we tell, it's about the ocean whispering to you. It's about the things that you find in the forest, right? Nature isn't just a thing that is separate from us. It is a part of us and a part of who we are. Protecting nature should be second nature, like we protect ourselves. Protecting the ocean and the things that I see there are the things that, to me, make life beautiful. To me, make me feel good when I'm feeling sad. They make me feel free. They remind me that I am part of something larger than myself, and that no matter what I do or where I go, I am at home, and I am there, and I am connected because I am a part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the pandemic taught a lot of people about the importance of wellness. And I think there's a lot of research out there that shows that if you want to have good wellness, what you have to do is get out of the office in your home and get out in nature, right? Regardless of where that be. I myself am lucky enough to have a job where I'm out underwater all the time anyway and getting paid for it. So I have that benefit, but I think any of us can sort of empathize with the feeling of, yeah, at the end of a long week, what I want to do is get out of here and get into the mountains, right? Or out into the sea. I do think as well, like if you look at all the major religions, we all have this underpinning in there of stewardship, that this is something that we're supposed to be taking care of. It's not a commodity that we're meant to be using, but something that we're supposed to be sustaining for the next generation's usage as well and enjoyment. And that runs from Christianity to Islam to Buddhism, right? So I think it's a common thread of humanity to want to appreciate and sustain the natural environment into the future.
Food security, food security, food security. I grew up in the shores, for the last 50 years I grew up in the shores of Rams in Ras Al Khaimah. I've seen how wonderful was the long time days when there was no plastics, no dumping of trashes, and responsible ancestors and grandfathers and fathers as well. We are responsible of the food security not for the UAE, not for Ras Al Khaimah only, for the whole Gulf. If we do not save our environment and make it more sustainable, we will definitely be affected. Second, Ras Al Khaimah is non-oil country economy, very diverse and very reputable and prominent in tourism activities due to the diverse environmental and terrains and climates. amazing, beautiful mountains close to date tree farms, close to the shores, and an amazing open, limitless desert. The world is coming. The world is watching us. The world seeing what we are doing. Locals and people who have decided to live in here in Ras Al Khaimah, they're all coming and watching how we are dealing with these issues. We don't want to, not for them, but we don't want to show the negative aspect of tourism.
Not been said. And here in Ras Al Khaimah, we appreciate nature. We invite people to come and appreciate the beautiful nature that we enjoy. And every time the mountains come out, honestly, my day just gets 10 times better. All right, thank you so much to all of our speakers, Sam, Dr. Ver, Mr. Abdullah. You've all been an absolute delight. I don't want to keep you all too much longer because we're actually approaching the end of our session, but thank you so much. Please come back once again, and I hope that you guys enjoy the festival. And to all of our audience, thank you very much as well for coming. And yeah, we'll see you at next year's RACFAF and also until the end of the month and next month. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.